now. I tried to go live 3 times just now and it kept kicking me out. Okay, welcome. Hello, welcome to another Wednesday live. I'm Anne, and today we are going to talk about, should we sell everything and just start over? Should we sell everything and start over? Not start over, but should we sell everything to travel, right? Which is kind of, by the way, like starting over. There's a lot of correlations to that. It's why I think a lot of people love travel. When they travel, when they experience being in a new location, being in a new environment, it rewires your brain a little bit. And so it's like being in a new place or starting over from scratch, which is one of the benefits. I talk about travel being therapeutic and being like going to a rehab center sometimes, because it takes you out of your normal environment to do that. But okay, the should I sell everything? Well, first of all, welcome. Right now we've got 3 people. Hello. I don't know which 3 people you are, but thank you for joining me on this live. Oh, I see Francie. 3rd time's a charm. Good morning. Yes, 3rd time is a charm. I'm hoping there's not a huge delay. I'm hoping. Please I believe I set this video to not monetize, which means hopefully you didn't see an ad before it started, although I can't control the ads before the video. So maybe I can't. Hey, John. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. So yeah, I think travel is very romanticized, with good reason. Travel is fantastic. Travel is romantic. Travel is epic. And so I understand why it's romanticized. But, oh, there's no ad prior. Yes. I feel like the ads before delays how quickly we talk to each other. And so I've decided during the live, no monetization, because then ads will pop up. And I believe if I do a long enough video, ads pop up even while I'm talking, which is annoying, especially in a live. Afterwards, the replay, sometimes you got to do it, but during the live, it's just annoying. Okay. So yeah, travel is romanticized, as it should be, because it's awesome. I am one of the people that definitely romanticize it, but I also try to keep a realistic look, which is, it's not for everyone. Well, let me rephrase. Travel in some form is probably for everyone, but travel full time, moving to a new country, living in an RV, these are things that are very personal. And so I think the blanket statement of, hey Karen, the blanket statement of sell it all to travel is potentially dangerous to people who have never traveled, or people who, I'm going to just use the word naive, who just don't understand themselves very well, and or who don't understand the country very well. So we talked about this, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the idea of an expat's got to travel, a traveler's got to travel. So somebody who moves to Mexico, it's their first time moving to another country, you'll probably love Mexico. But over time, and this might take a week, it might take a month, it might take several years, you might realize, hey, maybe Mexico's not for me, or maybe the city I chose in Mexico is not for me. And so you'll see a lot of travelers who start in one country or one city, they move to another city or another state, let's say in the country, or they'll move to another country. Like maybe they started life. Lauren Bronner, I think is her name. I forget. She changed her YouTube channel name, so now I can't remember her original channel or her current channel name. It's her name now. Her YouTube channel is not her name, but she used to be just a La Paz local, if that makes sense. And she used to do all these videos about traveling throughout Mexico, but her home base was kind of in La Paz. That's where her heart was. She's recently moved to a more travel lifestyle. Like I don't think she's necessarily based anywhere, but she's now in Europe. And so you see her posting from Italy and you see her posting from all these other places. That's expat life. There's an element of, you don't pick one place and just stay there. There is no perfect country. You pick a place, you enjoy it for as long as you enjoy it. And then a lot of people do move again, and still others just move back home. They've had enough of like full-time travel life, and so they want to come back home. And so I would say, instead of telling yourself mentally that I'm going to sell it all to travel, This all or nothing mindset, I think, is fun, but it can also be a little bit harmful, a little bit misleading. And so instead, I think with most things that we do, we should always have the end in mind. And I don't mean the end as in knowing your plan 5 years from now, or certainly 10, 20, 30 years from now, but just knowing that things change, right? Starting RV life, knowing that you might not always be an RVer, right? Starting with a Class B and then realizing, I think I can pull a trailer. I think I would rather have a fifth wheel. Starting with Mexico and then realizing Spanish is really hard. I think I want a country that speaks English, or I think I want a country that's more island life than Mexico is, or I think I want, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, just starting new chapters in our lives, knowing that most chapters have an end and that there's other chapters to be had. And so this idea of selling it all and going for broke, well, one, it's a young man's game, and two, it's unrealistic. It's unrealistic that the thing that you decide you want to do right now is the thing you'll always want to do. I'm 45. I know myself really, really well. I have traveled literally my whole life. I still cannot tell you how I'm going to end up, where I'm going to end up. Some days I think I'll end up somewhere overseas, somewhere in a foreign country. Other days I'm like, I might end up in an RV, maybe not this RV, but an RV. Other days, I could absolutely go back to living in a house. I'm currently temporarily, right, living with my dad. And there are nice elements to living in a house. So this idea of like all or nothing, I think is dangerous. But travel is also expensive. It is a luxury lifestyle. Even if you're on a budget, because I'm on a budget as well, it's still a luxury lifestyle. It's still financial decisions need to be made, right? I have to prioritize the things that are important to me, which means I'm deprioritizing other things, which means I'm putting my money in the places that I think matter. And for me, that's travel, right? So there is an element of, I would much rather have the ability to travel, whether it's in an RV, going to Mexico, going to Europe, whatever, than to have a beautiful, amazing mansion with all the bells and whistles. Like, if I have a choice between the two, I would choose travel, because that's me, right? Might not be you. But again, if you have any kind of a budget, you probably can't have both necessarily at the same time immediately. There are ways to build up to it maybe, but just not always possible. So I thought I would talk about, instead of selling it all, and especially because I know a lot of you guys have long-term plans, like you're not leaving tomorrow for Mexico. You are planning on next year, the year after that. Some of you guys have 5-year plans for when you're going to start RV life, or when you're going to move to Mexico or move to Europe, right? You have time. Here's what I would recommend, especially if you've not traveled and moved to foreign countries or moved into an RV ever, is to right size your possessions. Okay? It's gonna be in the category of minimalism, but it's not minimalism. I'm not a huge like I don't believe in, just like I don't believe in selling it all to travel. I don't believe in, only owning 6 shirts, only owning 5 books, only owning, like, although I think I do actually only have 6 shirts. But that's a me thing. That's what's right for me right now. I do believe in looking at all the things you own, getting rid of any dead weight. When you live in a house, you just collect things. You just collect stuff, some of which hold memories, some of which do not, right? Some of which you used to use, but now you don't use it anymore, and you're unlikely to maybe ever use it again. We also buy things that we literally never use. My mom, it was famous for getting a sale, finding an item on sale, a gadget of some sort that would be amazing in the kitchen, blah, blah. She probably used 80% of the items she bought at least once. But then she had like this mysterious 20% that's like, hey, Mom, what's this for? And she could tell you the reason she bought it. She could tell you, market wise what it does, but she's never actually used it because she has all these other gadgets that does things in the kitchen. So my point is we probably all have stuff we don't need, especially if you're living in a house, you tend to collect. I would, before you sell everything, just right size. Get rid of the dead weight, the things that no matter what type of lifestyle you're living, you're probably going to get rid of it anyway, right? Even in the house, you don't use it. That's dead weight. You want to trash that kind of, right? You can sell it, you can give it. It's up to you. Once you do, and I should clarify, you should do that with literally every item you own, right? So some of us, even military members, I find it funny when people who have been in the military for 20 years, they're doing their final move, like they're retiring, so they got to pack everything up and go back to wherever they're planning on going to. And they'll ask for help sometimes. So you'll go to their house and like, yeah, I can help you pack. No problem. I can help you do a couple of things. And as I'm helping somebody, I'm like, what's this box? What's this box? What's this? And they're like, oh, I haven't opened that in years. I think it holds all of my something or other, but I haven't looked at it for the process of travel life. If you're thinking that you might want to travel full time, literally touch everything. Literally touch it. Eyes on it, in your hands, ponder it. Where does it belong? Back in the box? Does it need to be displayed? Did you forget you had it? You need to sell it. You need to give it, do the things, but put it to use somewhere. I absolutely do believe that what you do with your things, your physical things, is probably a reflection of what you do in your mind, what you do with your experiences, what you do with life. And so if you want to enjoy the things that are around you more, it requires seeing it. It requires touching it. It requires knowing it exists. And so the things in your attic, the things in your basement, the thing in the spare room, probably occasionally go through it, but definitely if you're thinking about doing full-time travel life, touch it. Touch it, smell it, feel it, whatever, and make a decision about where it belongs. Again, my mother, I would not call my mother a hoarder, by the way, but she has some tendencies to keep things. And so towards the end, I would say probably 2 years before she got really sick, I read Marie Kondo's The Art of Tidying Up, The Magic of Tidying Up. I forget, but Marie Kondo, she's got anyway, minimalist type lifestyle. And she had me going through, because I thought I was leaning minimalist, right? Like not severe, crazy minimalist, but because I traveled my whole life, every time I move, I touch everything to see if I'm going to take it with me to the next place. So I would have told you, I did tell people actually, because other people recommended Marie Kondo to me. And I was like, I'm sure I already do it. I already have gotten rid of the things that I don't need. I'm like, maybe if I'm not 100% there, I'm like 95%. I'm like really there. Read the book, pondered it, touched all my things again. And I had just moved to Florida at this point when I read the book, which meant I had just gone through all of my possessions and downsized. Every time I move, I get rid of more things. So I'm like, there's no way this early in my Florida life that I've already collected more. And it wasn't that I had collected new things that didn't serve a purpose. I brought things with me from Virginia that I didn't realize I hadn't touched in a while, that I didn't realize it was dead weight that I was carrying. So I got rid of so many more things. And as you get close to retirement, as you ponder, move into the next location, travel life, RV life, I think a really important first step is just figuring out what you have. Because depending on what kind of travel life you want to do, you're probably going to have to get more stuff. Right? So one, if you want to do RV life, you got to get an RV. And there are lots of RV products that you will at least consider getting. And I would say, if you don't want to accidentally over purchase for your RV life or your regular travel life, it starts with knowing what you have and understanding yourself. When you start looking at your possessions, there's an element of, I haven't used these items in so long. They probably still hold sentimental value, maybe. So I'm not saying you have to get rid of things that are sentimental at all. But there's a level of self-understanding when you're like, okay, I love this item, this product, this thing, because my mother gave it to me or because something, but I never use it. This will not follow me to travel life because if it breaks during travel life, my heart will be broken. Or this will follow me through travel life because it brings me such happiness when I see it, even though I don't technically use it. So I'm going to bring it. And it just gives you a self-understanding, right, of the things you need before you start purchasing new things. Because otherwise, because my mom did this, not in travel life, but in house life. We'll backtrack a little bit. We had traveled up until I was 17. 17 is how old I was when my family moved to Georgia. So prior to moving to Georgia, my family, every time we moved, sometimes we were in a place for 6 months. Often it was a year or 2 years, but right. In that life, my mother didn't collect too much because it's such a hassle to pack things up and move it. She's got 5 kids by the end. And so the stuff accumulates, the more people that are in your life, right? When she moved to Georgia, they bought their very first house. My dad was, how old was my dad? I think we're going to say he was 47. He was 2 years older than I am. I'm 45. He was 2 years older than I am now. And he bought his first house. That sometimes baffles my mind, just so you know. But anyway, because we just moved all the time. And so he didn't feel like it was intelligent to buy a house and move. Anyway, we don't come from a wealthy family. We don't come from whatever. So the idea of investment properties, while it sounds cool, it also includes like, who's going to manage it if I'm constantly moving? Who am I going to trust enough with this new place? Especially as you're moving to new places and therefore you don't know the people in the new place who could be a property manager because you just got there. So there's anyway. So when my family moved to Georgia, this is when they bought this house and they've been living here ever since. So again, that was when I was 17. I am 45 now. It's close to 30 years that they've been living here. And so my mom got excited, obviously, as she could. Again, we didn't have the money for her to like immediately redecorate. But as things broke and as she was able to replace them, she would now start picking items that she really loved, that she thought would be useful. She always dreamed of having, but she really couldn't because we traveled all the time. And so my parents really settled in. My mom started buying things. And again, I wouldn't call it hoarding, but there was an element of, I've always wanted this. And, because it was in the back of my mind, now I have a house, now I'm going to buy it. Does this kind of make sense? This idea of you probably want to reassess, touch all the things, and just get rid of the dead weight. Does that make sense? I've seen some comments pop up. Let me backtrack really quick. All right. Francie says she agrees travel experiences, new human connections bring more joy than things. Yes. Yeah, I think experience and connection and over possessions, right? Not to say that having a house that's nicely decorated isn't a good thing, but for me and for a lot of people who enjoy travel, if we can choose only one, there's something about travel, guys. There's something about actual people and connections. Is it also because I'm older? No, there's a lot of 20-year-olds that travel. So I don't think it's an age thing. I just think it's a life thing. All right. So John says, a feature of being a true hoarder is an exaggerated reaction towards any attempt at clearing their stuff. It creates a real emotional crisis. No truer words, John. After I read Maria Kondo and I touched everything again. Literally, so I started the process of being like, I like this, I like this, I like this. Like, that's how it kind of started when I was doing Marie, because I'm like, I do this. I didn't do it to the level that Maria does. And I don't think you have to, by the way. I do want to emphasize that. I don't think you have to be a minimalist. I don't think you have to get rid of all the things that you don't currently use. I don't think you have to get rid of all the things that don't bring you joy. I'm not an advocate for anything extreme, generally speaking. You don't have to go crazy, but there is a joy that does happen in right sizing, in looking at all the things you have and going, okay, yes, this is something that I just always want in my life. I'm going to keep it. Here's where I'm going to put it. And then, but also being able to go, it served a purpose. I enjoyed this item. I don't think I needed them. I think it's better to give this to someone if it's reusable, to give it to somebody who can use it, donate it, sell it. I will say I was strangely surprised at the things I threw away when I did Maria Kondo. Like, the things that once I decided it was no longer for me, then the next question is, where does it go? Do I, again, donate it, give it to someone, sell it, throw it away? What do I do with this item? And there were a lot of things that were broken, literally broken, to where not only did I not want it, but you can't really give away something that's like, I kept a lot of things that had flaws, but because they also had habit and memories and, other things kind of tied with it, I kept it. But the reality was I couldn't give it away. It literally was just stuff that would be thrown away. That's what surprised me the most during Marie Kondo. And yeah, again, because I already do that. I already have exactly what I need. So step one, I think for especially full time, if you think you're going to go all in on travel, you're going to completely move to a new country, you're going to do whatever, right size. Look at what you have. Even if you don't get rid of it all, right? Just look at what you have, and then you can self-assess. Okay. So for example, my kitchen table that I had in my old house, I loved my kitchen table, but I also hated my kitchen table. I don't know if that fully, I loved a lot of things about it, but I also hated a lot of things about it. I had this beautiful, it was like a bar table, square. Well, it was a square if I didn't put the inlet in. I normally kept it a square because it's just me and Alex. So it was a square, bar chairs, right? Essentially high chairs. Wood, heavy, gorgeous. It had all these inlaid sections, grooves in the table. At a glance, it looked clean. But when you sit at a table long enough, then you see the grooves and the things getting stuck in it. And it felt like I would spend way too much of my life with a toothbrush, because it was the only brush I could think of that would get into the grooves well. And even a toothbrush was too big, right? It's much more slender. But I was constantly cleaning this thing. Constantly. I did eventually sell it. But my point is, I only sold that table once I knew I was going to retire and do full-time travel. Right? Before you make that decision, getting rid of your table is probably a ridiculous thing to do, because you probably still want a table in your dining room, right? Or your kitchen, whichever. You probably want a table. So even if it's not the table that brings you the most joy or the table that you want to have forever, it serves a purpose. So I don't want you getting rid of things that serve a purpose. But then you mentally you're like, okay, I'm keeping these things because they serve a purpose and or I love them and or whatever. But when I start travel life, am I going to pay a mover to move this gigantic table to Mexico? If I go to Mexico, is that what I'm going to do? If I do RV life, Am I willing to pay a storage unit? And storage units, depending on how you look at it, are not necessarily expensive. Am I going to put it into a storage unit? Can I store it at my dad's house, which is what I did? Can I store it at my dad's house and or friend, loved one, somebody you trust? Can I put these things there? What am I going to do with it? And you start making a mental note. And so my mental note when I first retired, which was back in 2019, was we're going to do RV life. I bought the RV. Obviously, this table's not going to fit in the RV, but it's an expensive table. It's a big table. What if I hate RV life? Because when I did RV life, I went full in. I had never slept in an RV before. I had never driven an RV before. I'd driven like a 5-ton for the military, but I'd never traveled in, right? Any kind of vehicle. I'd never done car camping. I have slept in my car because I was once a college student, but with the exception of college life, I'd never like camped in my car or anything. So I went all in, but I didn't sell my things immediately. I had the luxury to not do that, which not everyone does. Instead, I moved everything after right sizing. I moved everything to my dad's house because if I ended up hating RV life, if life got expensive, which is a reality in the US, maybe I would have to get a job, settle down, like, do kind of the traditional thing. Maybe that would be something I have to do. And if I have to do that, the last thing I want to do is buy an entire house of furniture. So the first thing I did was I right-sized, got rid of the things that I know for sure, no matter what life I'm in, I do not need these items anymore. But with the rest of it, and especially with furniture, I didn't immediately give it away. I took it to my dad's. He's got a basement, and I put the stuff there. My dad's basement, just like a lot of storage units, not the best place to store things. Just, right? So I did it realizing, knowing that this is temporary. My dad's basement is the place where there's more moisture than the rest of his house. And so furniture, books, clothing, if it stays there too long, it's going to get moldy, it's going to have damage, etc. So a decision does need to be made, but it doesn't need to be made right now. So I ended up storing it. Doing RV life. It was only while I was in Mexico, I think I was in Mexico about a year, maybe a little less than a year, that I called my sister and I said, you can sell everything that is not Alex's item, because Alex, obviously, he's not going to want his item sold. So nothing that is Alex, nothing that is Christmas, which is also an Alex thing, but all the other things, his bed, everything. I was like, that, my sister does garage sales all the time. On your next garage sale, go ahead, get rid of it. We'll split the profit, move on. But one, it's not everything. So obviously she didn't sell the RV. The things that are related to the RV, I stored in my dad's spare bedroom, away from the house and the things that I knew I might have my sister or somebody sell for me. I also thought I might come back and sell it myself. That was an option. But again, I ended up having my sister sell it. So should you sell everything? I think the first thing you should do is right size, because when you know what you own, then you know what your options are. Does that kind of make sense? I'm curious if any of you guys have literally sold it all, like literally, or if you have your items maybe in somebody's house, maybe in a storage unit. If you haven't done travel life yet, what are your plans? Because I know most of you have a plan to do like full-time travel life. What are you planning with it? Francie says yes, you sold it all. Like you got rid of it all, minus your suitcase items, because that's cool. If it was the right decision for you. I guess that's a related question. Was it the right decision for you so far if you've done that? Yeah, because I think that's my concern for people, is when you don't know yourself and you sell it. I think one of the benefits, like, do I like aging? I don't know if you can see, I don't know how clearly you can see the white happening. There are elements of aging that I do not appreciate at all, but I do love that I've lived 45 years so far, and I love that I've learned from lots of experiences. And so I feel like I can kind of look at my future and make a decision, an intelligent decision of, yes, I'm the type that's really going to prefer option A over option B. Or a lot of times when people give me only two options, there's usually an option C that I'm like, no. Option C, the curated option is the one for me because I know myself pretty well. Being a certain age, right? Being a certain age. I think it was when I was literally the day I turned 30 is when I stopped freaking out over aging. When I kind of realized I'm kind of exactly where I need to be. And not that I was going to die at that moment, but like my future is based on something I can control. Like I'm intelligent enough to where I'm not a leaf in the wind, just doing what other people tell me to do. And you know, I can steer this ship. I can kind of do what I want. It was a beautiful realization. Fran says, things we love but never use. Digital photographs. And I do also like print. Don't get me wrong. But the quantity that is in print maybe didn't need to be there. Although I will say the negative of print, positive of digital, is prints can get ruined. Negative of digital, I have had entire hard drives just fry, completely get destroyed. So this is where digital on the cloud feels a little safer to me sometimes. But either way, yes, there's other ways to remember those moments. There's other ways than just maybe the way we're used to. Not everything digital is better, but it's an option. It's an option to consider. I prefer a physical book. For example, if I'm going to read a book, I would much rather have a real book. But in travel life, books are bulky, they're heavy. You know, if you've got somebody paying for your move, which the military does, I had the military transfer my books everywhere I went until Florida, which was my last duty station. And that was when I made myself stop and assess. How am I going to travel? How am I going to keep all these books? Is there true benefit? Will Alex really ever read these books? It's one of those gray areas where it's like, how can I possibly predict? True. But I can't live a life where I collect things until I die on the assumption that maybe Alex will one day have the same taste in books that I do. It's a pretty slight chance, I think. That was also another discussion I had with my mom, because she would be like, oh, one of the kids could use it. And I'm like, Mom, when you pass, you know, which is a weird conversation, by the way. And I had this conversation with my mom, I think it was about 2 years before she got sick. So I had no idea how soon some of this might apply. But I'm like, when you pass, you know, she has, for example, teacup collection, a lot of which I contributed to. I said, I'm not going to want every cup in your collection. I'm going to want a special cup. So yes, I would want a cup that I think is pretty, that I think is beautiful. But Mom, it would be extra special to me to know that of these, I don't think it was 100 cups, but she had many, many teacups. Of these 100 cups, which are the ones that you truly love and which are the ones that you kept because maybe somebody gave it to you as a gift, because my mom collected cups. So maybe somebody gave it to you, so you kept it, but you don't have any personal attachment to it. Which one, like, it would be nice. I would prefer to have one that you loved and that I also think is cute, right? Like that's the combination. But if all I have is this, I'm going to end up with a random cup, and I'm going to, if I'm honest with myself, have to say the words, it's my mother's cup, and I have no idea if she thought it was cool. I have no idea if she loved this cup. I have no idea, you know. It's the same for she has scarves and she has things that she perceived as useful, and they are useful. It's just, I don't use a lot of scarves. My sisters don't use a lot of scarves. Do we want one of her scarves? Yes. Do we want a scarf that my mom today looks at with love? Yes. If I don't wear scarves very often and I'm going to get one of my mom's scarves, I want one that she loved, that she used, you know? So anyway, right sizing is helpful. And just on her, like, the more items you possess, like the more you have to freak out about, the more you have to take care of, the more you have to work, like it is mentally relieving to get rid of things that you don't care about in the first place, and you don't need, and you don't use, and you don't want. Like, then it shouldn't be in your house. It shouldn't be something you have to ever look at. You should get rid of it. And with the exception of one main item, most of our possessions depreciate over time, right? So there's no like keeping an item thinking that it's going to do something financially for you in the future. If you sell it today, you sell it tomorrow. Most items you're going to get less tomorrow than you do today. Most items. So there's not necessarily a financial benefit to keeping everything, but the replacement value is probably very high. Meaning, if I get rid of all of my dishes that are obviously paid for, right? So I get rid of all of my dishes thinking I'm going to do travel life, so I'll just use dishes at the new place. But then I change my mind. I realize I can't do travel life forever because sadly, so one, you might just self-assess and realize I don't actually like to travel, or I don't like to travel overseas, or I like to have my own place and just travel for a vacation and come back home, right? You might realize that literally selling everything and moving on does not work for you. You want to come back home. Replacing all your dishes will cost more, right? So just from a financial benefit or financial analysis, getting rid of everything means you're going, if it's something that you're going to replace one day, that's a huge financial loss. So it's a big decision, something you shouldn't do lightly. I do want to say probably the hardest, the big dollar items are the ones that's going to have the biggest effect. And those items you probably need to really, really analyze more, right? Before you sell it. So things like your car, things like your house. If these are things you own, whether it's paid off or not, these are things that you do need to ponder. How long am I going to be gone? Now, in the case of a car that sits there and nobody's using and nobody's taking care of is deteriorating, right? We know that as soon as you buy a new car, you drive off the lot, it's already depreciating. So every day it's depreciating. Every day that somebody's not using it, it's depreciating faster. So I would say selling a car, if you're going to do travel life, is not a horrible decision. It's a decision that I think will benefit a lot of people, not have to pay insurance, if they have a car payment still. Some people's insurance is really, really high. Some people's monthly insurance is more than my monthly rent in Mexico, which at the max was $500 US. But depending on the currency exchange rate, I've had it as low as 300. My RV, which I am still making payments on, is $400. Well, like $390. My rent, when the dollar got strong compared to the peso, I have had it where this RV that was sitting at my dad's house cost me more than my house that I was renting. It boggles the mind a little bit. It boggles the mind. So when it comes to cars, there is an element of cars depreciate really quickly. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to sell it, especially if you're very confident travel life is for you. And I guess we'll clarify, non-car travel life is for you. But know that there are options where if you're not sure, maybe don't sell your car just yet. Definitely, like I wouldn't sell your car if you're thinking you want to live in Mexico. I wouldn't sell your car before you've ever visited Mexico. I would visit Mexico first, / I would move to Mexico first, right? You get your 6-month visa, hopefully. Not visa, but the FMM. After which, 6 months is okay. Your car's sitting there 6 months, especially if somebody occasionally cranks it, turns it on, you should be fine, even if nobody's actually driving it. And then at 6 months, you come back home, you reassess. if Mexico / travel life, maybe it doesn't have to be Mexico per se, but if living in another country is for you and it's a situation where you don't want to or you can't bring your car, that's a great time to sell your car. I wouldn't sell your car before you've ever moved to Mexico. Even though, yes, there are people who move to Mexico one time and then they never come back to the US. That's the thing. Your house appreciates 99% of the time. Your house will not lose value because that's the way real estate tends to work. It might lose value in the short run, but like in the long run, in the long game, in 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, your house is going to appreciate, as opposed to your car and all the other possessions you have. I would say, 9 times out of 10, you're going to want to keep your house, rent it. Yeah, I would lean towards keeping it. That being said, renting it is a headache, can be a headache. Renting it means a property manager if you're not in the area. Renting it means not only are you going to have to deal with whatever emergencies are happening in your actual life, wherever you go, you're going to have to deal with emergencies in the house. So there is a cost overhead, even if your house is paid off, that you'll have to deal with. So again, this is kind of similar to the car, I would test out travel life before selling your house, always. But if you come to a point where you're like, okay, I definitely want travel life and the headache of maintaining my house is too much, even if my renter pays what they need to pay. And also, not all houses are rentable. Not all houses are in an area or in a condition to be able to be rented profitably, if that's the word. So if you decide to sell it, I would say just be really careful with the equity, with the amount of money you get for selling your home, and save it, because there is a high chance that wherever you go, you will want a house at some point. Whether you buy a house in Mexico, which you might do, or you buy just another house if you come back to the US. And houses, even in Mexico, are expensive enough to where you're going to want to save that nest egg, right? So don't, what I hate here, like what breaks my heart is when people say they sold their house and they're living off the equity of their house as they travel the world. If you're living off the principal equity of your house as you travel the world, that means that your saving is depleting. And at some point, what are you going to do? So that breaks my heart a little bit. If at all possible, save the amount, the majority. If you're able to invest properly, and I'm not an investment advisor, depending on the equity we're talking about, maybe you can live off of predominantly the interest you make, or does that kind of make sense? But the actual principle of it, do your best to preserve that, because if you move back to the US, whatever you sold your house for today, in 5 years, you cannot buy back the same house for the same amount. That house will appreciate, right? And again, the same for if you buy property in Mexico. Are there cheap houses in Mexico? I'm sure, yes. They're cheaper than the US? Yes. But it doesn't necessarily mean they're cheap, especially the house that you might want to have. So I'm probably the most timid when I hear people say they're selling their house, especially if they've never traveled, they've never moved anywhere, they've never lived in a non-house environment. The house is probably the biggest piece that I would be the most cautious about getting rid of. So save your equity if you have to, but don't be afraid to cut your losses. Like sometimes you just got to cut your losses, and that's okay too. So right size, don't just do it because everyone else is doing it. Do it because you know it's the right decision for you. Easy Meal says, blessings to you and your son. Thank you. Thank you. And to you and yours too. Francie says, we are close to just a carload for us too moving forward, minus furniture. But our move to a tiny place in Nayarit this winter. Our place is for sale. As soon as it's gone, so is the furniture. So like you're selling the house with the furniture. That is cool. But again, I will say most people like houses. I would save it. If you end up loving Nayarit or anywhere, it doesn't have to be there, maybe buy a new house. That's an option. But I would say houses and property have they just have so much value as opposed to a table or a car, which everything tends to depreciate. Houses tend to always go towards, even if it's a house you can't rent, having property is in and of itself value. Having land is an asset that not everyone can afford, right? So yeah, right size, do what's right for you, sell your house if that's what's right for you. Just be really careful not to use that entire thing for your daily living and your normal life, like just because then it'll disappear. And how will you afford life then? Again, if you're fortunate enough to have retirement and other income sources, it's a little less scary. But especially right now, as I'm at my dad's house, how grateful am I that my son wants to go to school. He wants to go to a normal-ish school, but he wants to have a physical school that he goes to, multiple times. That requires a house. It doesn't require a house, but it's much more comfortable in a house. How grateful am I that my dad has property where, one, I was able to park my RV for 3 years while in Mexico. So I didn't have to pay like a storage fee for the car. Like, grateful, right? How grateful am I that this exists? How grateful am I that I have a house that I can live in while my son goes to school? Like, so the value of a home is something that I don't want people to undermine or feel like it's a burden. Houses can be burdens. In my life, I've had 3 houses. The first house I was 26 when I bought. It was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, fixer-upper, tiny house that I learned a lot about. Like, I learned a lot about houses and how to fix houses from that house because it needed a lot of love. I only lived in it 1 year and I got transferred, and I sold it. When you sell a house after only living in it for 1 year, you're grateful to break even, which is what I did. At that age, I just mentally couldn't, again, I don't come from a family that does this. So I couldn't mentally wrap my head around renting my house out, and my house was a fixer-upper. So it's not like a brand new house where the renter is going to be like, oh, everything is perfect, thank you. No. I had a fixer-upper that I was pretty confident every month at least the renter would be like, oh, this happened. Oh, this happened. Oh, that broke. Like, that's the kind of house I had. I loved my house, but that's the kind of house I had. And so when I got transferred out of state, I couldn't wrap my head around how I could possibly, I would have to get a property manager, but how would we handle like the finances of fixing this up? Because I had put a lot of money into fixing up my house already. It was not done, but I had put like 10,000, something like that, into making my house livable. I still love my house, but it was a huge fixer-upper. And I fixed it up enough to where they definitely paid a little bit more than what I paid originally, but not enough to cover the cost of everything that I used to fix it up. Again, not a professional house flipper or anything. And my goal wasn't to flip the house. My goal was to live there, but I forgot. I didn't really forget, but I didn't take into consideration how hard it would be to rent this place out once I left. Like, because I was in the military and I knew I would get transferred, and there's a high chance I would get transferred out of state, which is what happened. And I just didn't fully wrap my head around it. And I wasn't expecting to necessarily leave the state quite as early as I did. Things happen. It's military. So I ended up selling the house. I broke even in terms of the mortgage, but in reality, I had some debt that I incurred while fixing up my house. Not a lot of debt, so we got over it. The next 2 houses I bought was with my husband because I got married. So I was single when I bought the first house. Then I got married, got ultimately 2 houses with my ex. But when we divorced, selling the house kind of became mandatory. So we sold that. While I don't regret it, because I think for me, the first house, it is difficult to rent out a home that's a fixer-upper. It was a 1920 house. It was old and it needed a lot of attention. And only a homeowner will do that kind of love and attention and tolerate maybe some of the deficiencies in your home, right? When it's yours, you tolerate a lot more. Then the other 2 houses, I think it's unfortunate that I had to sell it, but also I do not regret my divorce. So I do not regret the things associated with my divorce, such as getting rid of the houses. So I don't regret it. I don't think if you do sell your house that you'll necessarily regret it, but just do it eyes wide open. Just do it knowing that, okay, property values tend to increase. If there's a way I can rent it out while I'm gone, if my house is a good enough condition that I can rent it, it could become an income source one day. It could be one of the ways you make money. When you initially rent your house, you might, depending on how long you've lived in the house, maybe you only break even. Maybe it only covers the mortgage and the insurance, right? Something like that. But over time, as you pay off your house and as values increase, you'll probably make a profit out of renting your home. Again, if it's in the condition to do it. So just something I would strongly consider. However, if you have a house like my first house, you would have to know people in that area enough who can support renting that house and fixing it up for you while you are living in Mexico or wherever. Lots of things to consider, but I would say just as a blanket, don't assume you have to sell everything. I had a property manager for one of the houses that I had with my ex-husband. It was awesome, but it was also a really good house. It was a new house, relatively new house. So renting it was relatively easy. And I had a good property manager. Like everything was so smooth, even though we didn't live in the state anymore. But not all houses are going to be like that. Not all rental experiences will be like that. So it does depend. And I would say if you're a traveler, if you do decide to get a house in Mexico or wherever you travel to, because you're a traveler, it's probably best if you look at a house from the viewpoint of an investor more than the viewpoint of a homeowner. Meaning, ask yourself, how easy or difficult will it be to rent this home as is or with the changes that you have the skill set to make? And I don't mean you have to do the changes yourself, but you do have to be aware enough of the change that you're going to make to the house to where a contractor will not take advantage of you, or you'll be able to kind of quality assist, if you will, a contractor who's changing your house. How good are those skill sets as you invest, right? Because in our own homes, because we know what matters to us, things that don't matter to us, we might just not worry about. We might let it deteriorate and not take care of it. But a renter usually expects everything to be functional, everything to be a certain standard. So you just want to keep that in mind. The next house you buy, now that you're deciding to be a traveler, look at it from the viewpoint of an investor so that hopefully it can help you with your travel life and not hinder your travel life. All of this, the exception to the rule is if you are wonderfully wealthy, then maybe you don't have to worry about those things. But for those of us on a budget, these are things I would absolutely do. I hope that makes sense. Okay. John says, gambling on life ending before the money runs out. Risky business. Gambling on life ending before the... Oh, okay. So you're saying assuming that the money will not run out before you die. Agree. Like as you guys might know, I'm retired from the Navy. So I have a monthly paycheck that comes in. It is not enough for me to live the life I would like to live in the US if I had to have a house. Like if I were the type to where I didn't have my dad and I had to get a house in the US, the standard of living I enjoy and that I used to enjoy, my retirement will not cover. But it does cover a life in Mexico, certain parts of Mexico, and how I live there. So I can't express the comfort I get knowing that I enjoy Mexico. And Mexico is not the only country I could do this in, but just as an example, there's at least one country that I enjoy that is today affordable. But if I were to not have any way of producing income on top of my retirement, that would be a concern. Even though I know at some point Alex will move out, my son will move out, and so in theory, I don't have to financially take care of him. The reality is, one, I will probably be willing to help my son out maybe all his life. I don't want to say that too often, and I don't want to say it in front of my son ever, because I want him to absolutely be very independent. But I do know the reality is, push comes to shove, I'd probably help Alex with anything. But life gets more expensive, right? The cost of living in San Cris for me was between $1,200 to $1,500 a month, depending on what activities I did, which is slightly less than how much I get from the Navy. So my Navy retirement covered my Mexico life almost perfectly, right? So it works out really nicely, but Mexico's going to be more expensive next year than this year. Hopefully not by much. But it's just, that's the way things tend to be. Cost of living tends over time to increase, just like the cost of property tends to increase over time. And so having alternatives is important. You're never going to sell your car for what you paid for it. You're never going to sell, your backpack, your huge, I can't remember the brands people use, but there are fancy backpacks people use for travel life. You're never going to sell that for the amount that you paid for it, because that's not how these things work. So should you sell everything? Absolutely. If you don't want those items, if you don't want them, sell them. But don't blanket. Don't just be like, all or nothing. I got to sell it all and move on. You don't. Look at each individual item, hold it, touch it, ponder it, and then make an intelligent decision about where it belongs. I am speaking from a slightly, again, I have my retirement. I am speaking from a certain level of financial stability. I can't think of a better word right now, but so for example, for RV life, there are people who are leaving their homes not by choice, but because they have to. There are people who move to Mexico, not by choice, not because they necessarily want to move to Mexico, but literally because they feel like they can't afford life in perhaps the US, and Mexico feels much more financially feasible. So I do understand that, but even in those moments of desperation, assess, because when you self-assess, when you get rid of things and touch all the things you own, you learn. You're not just getting rid of things that are dead weight. You learn about you. You learn about the type of person you are. You learn about what not to buy again because you don't seem to use it and you don't seem to enjoy it. And you learn about you. So it's a good thing to do, even if you don't become a traveler. But yeah. Downsizing for the sake of downsizing, I think, is silly. I think you should always not downsize, but you should right size. You should look at every item and ponder it. I hope that makes sense. I hope I didn't babble too much about it. There was one thing that I think is also important that people don't do. It's similar to the right sizing of your things. Oh, Francis says, you're correct on keeping a safety net, whether it's a home you maintain to return to or stuff in storage. Have a plan. You should have the end game in mind. Have an exit strategy. What you don't want is to choose a lifestyle, RV life, move to Mexico, whatever it is, and be stuck there if you don't like it. The thing that's beautiful for those of us who are planning, let's say, to move to a new location or start a new lifestyle is that, again, travel is a privilege. Being able to move and start over is a huge, huge blessing. But we don't want to, again, unless you're incredibly wealthy, you don't want to assume that you won't put yourself in a situation where you can't move again, right? This is why when people ask me if they should move all of their furniture to Mexico, it's a tricky question. Some people really, really love their things and the furniture and everything. You're not going to find exact replacements in Mexico. You're just not. You might find close replacements. And so sometimes it is the right answer to pay thousands of dollars to move your stuff from the US to Mexico. Thousands of dollars. That is sometimes the right decision. You have to have thousands of dollars to move it, right? But on the flip side, if you change your mind and want to, so if you change your mind and you want to move back to the US, if your possessions, if your possessions were so important that you were willing to pay thousands to move them to Mexico, there's a high chance they'll be so important that you're going to want to move them to your next location, right? And so even within Mexico, I started in Merida. I loved Merida for the year and a half that I was there. If my son, or if other circumstances was such that, if Alex, for me, it would really be Alex, but if Alex really loved Merida, maybe he made super tight connections and he's like, I never want to leave, I would be okay with staying in Merida. It would not have shaken my world. Just like coming back to the US, some people that freaks them out having to come back to the US. It didn't freak me out because, one, I missed my RV, but two, I do have a dad that I don't mind living with. The American in me, the independent in me would rather have my own house, 100%. But I am good with living with my dad, and therefore coming back to the US was no big deal. But what I would hate is for you to move to Merida. You'll probably love it initially. Mexico in general is awesome. Every city you go to, the first impression will probably be relatively positive. Will you want to live there for a year, 5 years, 10 years? Right? So then to move with all your stuff from Merida to San Cris is going to cost you more thousands of dollars to move your furniture. Or if you choose Querétaro, or if you choose Ajijic, or wherever you move in Mexico, if the first place you land turns out isn't your home, then you're going to have to also pay to move to another location, right? So some of the costs with living in Mexico that I think expats, it's hard to say, right? It's really easy for us to tell you our monthly budget, right? I paid $1,200 to $1,500 a month living in San Cris. This does not include the cost of going back to the US, whether it was for a visa run or just to visit family. It does not include that. It does not include little vacation trips that I might have done throughout, right? It doesn't include that. It definitely does not include how much I had to pay. Again, I pay almost $400 a month for this RV, for the loan of the RV. That the $12 to $1,500, that does not include that. Do you know what I'm saying? So, and it's hard for me to tell you if you are the type to land in one place, not love it, and then you're going to move to another place. I'm not telling you the cost of the move from Merida to San Cris was the cost of the flight, and that was it. The flight, sorry, I should clarify. The flight plus the luggage, which I think the ticket I got, it was not much more. I don't travel with a huge amount of luggage. So Alex and I each have one, and I say each, it's combined. We don't separate, but I have 2 checked luggage bags when I travel. We have 2 carry-ons, one of which is a dog, in Mexico at least, right? So we have the dog, which counts as a carry-on, and you pay extra for that, for a dog. Another carry-on, and then personal items. So for us to travel from Merida to San Cris was relatively affordable because I didn't have all those things. But if I had even one more bag, if I had certainly furniture, right, then the cost of moving from city to city would have increased exponentially. So again, when I hear people say they want to bring their stuff to Mexico, I would still wait until you confirm where in Mexico you want to be. Unless, again, if you've got the finances, you've got the finances. But I would not, for example, use up your nest egg. I would not, if you just sold your house and you have some equity in that, I would do my darndest not to touch that, with the exception of for the next home that you purchase. Right? That's kind of the game I would play. So just keep that in mind. If you've never moved to Mexico, I would wait a minute before moving all your furniture down. You might end up wanting to live in La Paz, which is way, way north. And so it'd be much more affordable to move your furniture there than all the way down south to Merida. Just stuff to think about. Again, Merida is a lovely place. I'm not saying you'll hate it. I'm just saying not every city is for you. It might take you a minute to find out which Mexico city or which city anywhere in the world is for you. So you might know you want to keep your furniture. Storage might still be part of your life until you figure out what to do, what to really do. Francie says, you're correct on keeping a safety net, whether it's a home you maintain to possibly return to or stuff in storage is important. Have a plan for post-travel life. Emergencies happen. I always say there's going to be an age at which I probably can't travel. I kind of hope that I'll always be in an RV, but I don't know how to, like, at the end of life, I may not be the one choosing where I am, but more importantly, it may be really, really inconvenient for my family for me to be in an RV at the end of my life. You know, and that's something I'm going to always keep a mind on. So I just can't predict where I'm going to be or where I'm going to want to be or where I need to be. I do not want to be a burden to others. That the independent streak is there. So yeah, I want to have the nest egg to take care of things forever, if that makes sense. Cindy says, good morning. You started early today. So yeah, I changed it from last week to 9 because Georgia is getting hot. So I feel like 9 Eastern time is easier just for the weather wise. So I did start early and I'm about to wrap up, but if you've got any questions, or even just comments, I talk a lot in these. It's probably hard to interrupt my talking and I apologize, but just know every live, I can't imagine, certainly no time soon, are the comments going to override what I'm saying? Meaning I can always stop and read your comments and have a chit chat, even though I do talk a lot. So sometimes it might take me a minute to get to your comments. I'm a talker. If you guys have met, hopefully, Karen, Mom on a Journey. When we ask each other for coffee dates, we have to have like a 4-hour window or more because we just talk so much and we go in deep. We go in deep on the things we talk about. It is how I work. It's part of why I enjoy these lives because I feel like I can say my piece, you can have your comment, and you can, if you need me to dive in deeper to one thing or another. Although today I feel like we're on the same page. I feel like we understand each other, right sizing. Don't just throw it away, but also don't keep everything all the time. Like you gotta know yourself. You gotta know your things. So I feel like we're in agreement. I could be wrong. Okay, John says, I'll reset Alexa to remind me 9 a.m. Yes, we're going to do 9 a.m. So next week again, 9 a.m. Let me know if there's a particular topic you want to talk about. Usually by Sunday or Monday, I have an idea of what I think I want to talk about at the next live. But I'm always like, the beauty of a live is we're flexible and we can twist and turn as needed. But thank you guys for joining me today. It was fun as always. And I'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.